This is Mary Ann George with the University of Michigan's College of Literature, Science, and the Arts. We are talking with Professor Michałowski, the George G. Cameron Professor of Ancient Near Eastern Civilization. Professor Michałowski took pictures of the Berlin Wall before the Iron Curtain began to crack in Eastern Europe and the wall was torn down on November 9th. This month, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of that historic event. Professor Michałowski's photos will be on display at the University of Michigan's Institute for the Humanities through December 11th. The exhibit is free and open to the public. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to be at the wall?
I was actually traveling with a U of M alumni group. We went to Budapest, and then we went to Krakow, and then to Warsaw, and then we crossed the wall from East Berlin into West Berlin and stayed at the Hotel Kempinski. We went to the wall, and I took tons and tons of photographs with a regular point-and-shoot Olympus camera with film, believe it or not.
What images stood out for you?
Well, the wall was simply one of the most important places to go visit in Berlin at the time. It was still standing. We actually came through the wall from the other side. But I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and so I actually crossed it a couple of times by train at midnight, which was a horrible experience. But this was something that just hovered over our lives through my whole childhood. And so, of course, I had to go see it.
So you had grown up on the other side of the wall. You said it hovered over your childhood. Can you talk about that in what kind of ways?
Well, I grew up in Poland, which of course was paradise compared to East Germany, which was terrible. But the wall was a symbol of the fact that World War II hadn't ended yet, essentially. For us, World War II did not end until the wall came down. It was a symbol of the fact that the world was divided, that we were suddenly in Eastern Europe. The wall was also a symbol of the division of Germany, which was a tremendously important issue in Europe. At the time that the wall came down, there were actually elements in Western Europe who did not want this to happen. The cause of the wall coming down was much more linked to events in Russia and in Eastern Europe, such as the rise of solidarity and the various movements to end communism. The Round Table discussions in Poland had a much stronger effect since Berlin was completely destroyed during the war. On the Western side, it was built up as a kind of monument to the success of capitalism, and on the Eastern side, you had this dour, tremendously oppressive state. The contrast was tremendous.
What struck you about the graffiti? I mean, there seems to be messages of various kinds on the wall.
The interesting thing about the graffiti is that it's clearly not simply German, that it's international. That is, that people from all over the world who came to visit Berlin went to the wall and added to this graffiti. People concentrated their messages on here. And some of them have nothing to do with the division of Europe. They seem to have just become a place where people expressed their desire for freedom, for more progressive activity. Even though for us it was local, in many ways it became a kind of global symbol of oppression and division.
How important do you think it is for people to remember these stories, remember this, and what have people learned? Do you think we would ever go back to something like this now?
Well, I don't think we would ever go back to anything like this now. It's just impossible. But there are other forms of keeping people under control. There are countries still in the world which do not have a tremendous amount of human rights and individual liberty. But, as Brecht says in The Rise and Fall of Arturo Ui, you have to be beware because it can always come back. And not in this exact form as before, but governments can oppress people in a variety of different ways. And you always have to be on the lookout for that.
The exhibit is co-sponsored by the Weiser Center for Europe and Eurasia and the Institute for the Humanities.